The floating island, a bedtime journey beyond the stars. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It was the kind of cold, unkind rain that sank into your bones and made the world feel smaller. It clung to Elias's threadbare coat as he knelt in the muddy field, the smell of wet soil and bitter regret stinging his nostrils. His fingers trembled, not just from the cold, but from what he held, a silver locket, cracked and worn, its hinge broken, its picture inside long since water ruined. It was the last thing his sister ever gave him before the fever took her away, and tonight, it had snapped from the chain around his neck. He should have been used to loss by now. The village of Winmere had never been kind to the boy with no family, no future, and no name worth remembering. Elias had grown up in the shadows of other people's lives, sweeping floors, mending boots, and taking the kind of work that left his hands raw and his stomach half empty. The others called him lucky to even have a roof over his head, a sagging shack at the edge of the woods, where the stones whispered on moonless nights and the wind sounded too much like voices. But luck, he thought, would be finding the strength to forget. And he never had. Tonight was worse. The rain had unearthed things in the soil, old, brittle bones by the look of them, jutting from the earth where no grave should have been. He had stumbled on them chasing the glint of his locket in the dark, only to freeze when the earth beneath his feet let out a hollow sigh, as if the land itself had been holding its breath for too long. Elias. The voice cut through the downpour. Familiar. Steady. May. She was the only soul in Winmere who never looked at him like he was one of the ghosts the village whispered about. May was a blacksmith's daughter, her hands as calloused as his, her spirit twice as stubborn. When she reached him, she crouched by his side, brushing her damp, tangled hair away from her freckled face. "You found it?" she asked, her gaze landing on the locket. Elias nodded, closing his fist around it. "And something else." He tilted his head toward the exposed bones. May's expression darkened. "That's not right," she murmured. "No one's been buried here. Not for years." A sharp crack of thunder rolled overhead, and both of them flinched. In its wake came something stranger, silence. The rain, which had been relentless, ceased as though someone had thrown a great shroud over the sky. The only sound was their breathing, sharp and quick in the stillness. Then the air grew heavy. A low hum started beneath their feet, so soft at first it could have been mistaken for the aftershock of thunder, but it grew, steady, vibrating through the soles of their boots, up into their bones. Elias staggered back, pulling May with him, as the ground around the bones began to crack, shifting as though something beneath the earth was waking up. "We need to go," May whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. But Elias stood frozen, the locket still clenched in his palm, the world around him blurring at the edges. His vision swam, darkness curling at the corners, and in that moment, a voice, soft, low, almost tender, whispered his name from the void. "Elias." He snapped his head around, but no one was there. The hum deepened into a sound that felt impossibly ancient, like the grinding of stars against one another in a sky long forgotten. The ground split further, and from the blackness of the earth, something glinted. Not metal. Not stone. An eye. Open, unblinking, and staring straight at him. May yanked his arm, snapping the moment like brittle glass. "Run." They ran. The fields blurred past, the mud clawing at their boots, the whisper of unseen voices growing louder behind them. Elias didn't dare look back, even as the rain returned in a sudden, deafening roar, as if the sky itself was trying to drown out the sound of that voice. When they finally collapsed inside the crooked walls of his shack, hearts pounding and lungs burning, May spoke first. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked, though the answer already weighed heavy in her voice. Elias could only nod, his fingers finally loosening from around the locket, revealing the imprint of it pressed deep into his palm. But there, glistening faintly against his skin, was something new. A single, perfect grain of stardust. And outside, in the dark beyond the warped glass of his window, something waited. Rain lashed against the crooked tin roof of the shack as Elia sat motionless, her fingers wrapped tightly around the faded pendant her mother left behind. Just an hour ago, her best friend Tomas had vanished, one moment standing beside her under the mango tree, and the next, nothing but a ripple in the air and the scent of burnt leaves. No scream. No trace. Just that soft, bone-deep hum of something unnatural brushing against her skin like breath from a hidden world. Her heart throbbed with panic, but she couldn't move. Not yet. She stared into the dark, rain-slicked night, whispering his name as if the wind might return him. Tomas, a sudden knock at the door jolted her to her feet. Elia. Open, Hija, quick. The voice was raspy, urgent. She recognized it instantly, Mang Lito, the village healer. A strange man with glassy eyes and a hut that always smelled of smoke and seawater, he rarely spoke to anyone. Yet now, he stood drenched at her doorstep, holding a soaked leather pouch in one hand and an oddly glowing conch shell in the other. They've returned, he said without greeting. The aswangs have begun to hunt again. And you are not safe anymore. Backstory unfolding. Elia's world had always felt slightly off. She was raised by her grandmother, who muttered prayers in languages Elia never understood and kept mirrors covered with black cloth. Her mother disappeared when she was a baby. The villagers whispered about a family curse, something to do with the ocean and a betrayal long buried beneath tides and time. But no one had ever said the word aswang out loud until now. Elia followed Mang Lito inside. The air in his hut was warm, thick with incense, and shadows danced across the walls from a flickering oil lamp. "You felt them, haven't you?" he asked, not waiting for her answer. "Eyes on you at night. Dreams that leave you shaking." The vanishing boy was just the beginning. "What are they?" Elia asked, her voice barely above a breath. Mang Lito sighed. "Hunters. Shapeshifters. Spirits corrupted by blood. Long ago, your bloodline sealed them away, using a mutia blessed by the stars and sea. But your mother broke the pact when she fled the island. Now, they hunger again." The mentor appears. Mang Lito wasn't just a healer. He was a Bante, a guardian of ancient secrets, chosen by the sea itself. And he knew what Elia didn't. Her mother had been part of a hidden line of guardians, women who held a bond with the shadowy, the sea spirits beneath the waves. A bond that protected the boundary between their world and the dark. "She didn't abandon you, Anik," he said gently, watching her eyes widen. "She was taken. Just like Tomas." Elia blinked away tears. "Then why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because it would have made you a target too soon. But now, the signs have returned. And it's time you learned to protect yourself." From the pouch, he pulled a necklace, a twisted vine holding a pearl-like shell with a soft lavender glow. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. "This is your mother's mutia," Mang Lito said. "It chose you when she vanished. It holds a part of her spirit and power you will need." Elia hesitated. The shell was warm to the touch, and the moment her fingers curled around it, a wind whipped through the hut, extinguishing the flames and filling her ears with a distant roar, waves, wild and full of voices. She dropped it with a gasp. I don't want this," she stammered. "I just want things to go back to normal." "There is no normal anymore," Mang Lito said softly. "But you have a choice: ignore what you are and let the aswangs feast on your people, or fight." The hero's struggle. Elia wandered out of the hut, the mutia now tied loosely around her neck. Her heart felt heavier than it had ever been. She wasn't brave like her mother. She had never even left their barrio. What did it mean to fight creatures she barely understood? And worse, what if she failed? The village looked different now. Every shadow felt like it might be watching her, every breeze carried whispers. Even the trees seemed to lean inward, listening. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Her only friend had been swallowed by something from a world she never believed in, and the only adult who seemed to know anything told her that she was the key to stopping it all. She walked toward the shoreline, the waves calling her. The storm had passed, but the sea was restless, the wind sharp with salt. As she stood staring out over the water, the moon emerged from behind thick clouds, casting silver light across the surface. That's when she saw it. A figure. No, not just a figure. A creature, crouched on a jagged rock jutting from the sea. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, slick with water, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It stared at her without blinking, like it had been waiting. She froze, heart pounding. Was this a shadowy? Or something worse? Then, slowly, it raised a hand, not in threat, but in recognition. And its mouth moved, though she heard no sound. Elia. The voice didn't come from outside. It echoed inside her chest, soft and deep like the waves themselves. She stumbled backward, but then another sound cut through the silence. A scream. From the village. Elia turned, eyes wide, and saw fire rise in the distance, red, angry flames devouring one of the nipa huts. Another scream. And then the chilling, inhuman howl of something that wasn't part of this world. She clutched the mukya. It burned hot now against her skin. She had to go back. Cliffhanger ending. Elia ran through the trees, the glow of the fire guiding her. As she burst into the clearing, she saw it, a monstrous figure hunched over a lifeless body, its spine shifting, skin stretching unnaturally as it transformed. Its eyes glowed orange. Its tongue slithered out, tasting the air. It turned. And looked straight at her. Elia, it rasped, voice jagged like broken coral. We've been waiting for you. The mutya flared. Her body pulsed with sudden heat and fear. She had never felt more alone. But something in the shell, her mother's voice, maybe, whispered, "Stand firm, Anik. You are not broken. You are chosen." The world had gone silent. The village smoldered behind her, the last embers of the fire licking at the blackened skeletons of what had once been homes. And Tomas, gone. The boy who stood by her side on every hard day, who once swore they'd escape their miserable lives together, had been erased like a chalk mark in the rain. Elia sat on the edge of the bamboo footbridge, the mutya heavy against her chest, pulsing faintly beneath her worn shirt. Mang Lito's words echoed over and over in her head, "You were born for this, Anik. But the path you must walk is not one of comfort." She hated it. All of it. The whispers, the monsters, the way the world had shifted overnight like the rules had changed and no one had warned her. But nothing hurt more than the truth she had uncovered the night before, the truth Mang Lito had spared her until the last moment. Her mother hadn't been taken. She had chosen to leave. The mutya's soft glow when she touched it, the shokoi's voice whispering her name across the waves, all pointed to the same grim truth. Her mother had run from this fight, run from her, and the aswangs had slipped back into the world as a result. Elia felt the sting of betrayal gnawing through her chest. The one person she'd dreamed of finding, the one person she thought would save her, had been the very reason the darkness had returned. A village of ghosts, the survivors wandered like broken shadows, their faces pale, their words hushed. The attack had left more questions than bodies. No one saw the creature clearly. No one understood why it struck where it did. But Elia knew. The aswangs weren't hunting the village at random. They were hunting her. Mang Lito had offered her refuge in his hut, but Elia needed distance. Space to think. To feel the crushing weight of it all without eyes on her. She drifted toward the mangrove forest, where the trees swallowed the world and only the occasional bird call broke the quiet. That's when the air changed. The breeze stilled. The birds fell silent. And the scent came, a sour, rotting sweetness, like fruit left too long in the sun. She stopped walking. Between the tangled roots, something moved. At first, it looked like a child, crouched and swaying, its back toward her. Small, frail. Maybe lost. Elia, it whispered. Her stomach clenched. The voice wasn't human, not really. It was too perfect. Too sharp. She took a step back. The figure turned. Its face was a patchwork of features she recognized: Tomas's crooked smile, her mother's dark eyes, Manglito's rough jawline. But the skin didn't fit right, like a poorly sewn mask. It tilted its head, the voice warping into her mother's tone. "Come home, Anik." Elia stumbled backward, the mutia flaring hot against her chest. The creature hissed, its skin splitting, and retreated into the roots, leaving behind nothing but the lingering scent of decay. A heart-divided night came fast after that. Elia sat beneath the same old mango tree where Tomas had vanished, tracing the cracks in the bark with her fingers, wishing the world would slow down. Her mind drifted back to the night before the attack, the last real moment she remembered feeling safe. Tomas, sitting on the dirt with a flashlight tucked under his chin, making ghost stories sound ridiculous and silly. His laugh, warm and careless. And now, gone. She wondered if the aswangs were lying. If they had only taken his shape to hurt her. But the doubt was the sharpest wound. What if he was still alive, trapped somewhere between worlds? What if her mother had been too? And what if they both had chosen not to return? A bitter voice, one she didn't know lived inside her, whispered, "You're alone, Elia. You always have been." She clutched the mutia tighter. A world out of sight. In the days that followed, the tension only grew worse. The nights stretched longer, the moon hanging higher in the sky, too bright and too watchful. Villagers whispered about strange shapes moving through the trees, of animals found drained and hollow at dawn, their bodies untouched by teeth or claw. Elia couldn't sleep. When she did, dreams of Tomas and her mother filled her mind, their faces shifting between human and monstrous as if even in her dreams she couldn't trust them. And the shadowy, the creature she had seen by the shoreline, kept returning. Sometimes in her dreams. Sometimes in glimpses at the corner of her eye, standing half submerged, watching. Saying nothing. Manglito warned her, "The sea remembers. The mutia binds you to both worlds. And they are pulling at you now." Minor threats and growing suspense. One evening, while gathering water from the old pump on the far side of the village, Elia noticed the air grow still again. The hairs on her neck prickled. When she looked up, a figure stood at the end of the narrow dirt path. A man. No, not quite. His limbs were too long, his arms hanging past his knees. His head tilted unnaturally far to the side, as if his neck were half broken. He raised one hand and beckoned her forward. Her feet refused to move. Behind the creature, another shadow flickered in and out of sight. A second figure, slinking across the treeline on all fours, its limbs bending like they were boneless. Elia backed away, step by step, until her foot caught a stone and she stumbled hard into the grass. When she looked up, the path was empty. But the scent lingered. The scent of old fruit in wet soil. A heart at war. Back at Manglito's hut, she didn't tell him what she saw. She couldn't. Not yet. Her heart wasn't ready to admit what her mind had already accepted. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about choosing to become something else entirely. To accept her bloodline, her mother's secrets, the mutia's power, and face a darkness that was already inside her. She stared at the mutia long into the night, turning it over in her palm as the wind whispered through the cracks in the walls. What if the aswangs weren't monsters in the way she'd been told? What if her mother had left not out of fear, but out of desire? What if she wasn't meant to fight them, but to join them? The thought clung to her like wet clothes, chilling her to the bone. And somewhere, deep in the dark, the aswangs were waiting. Watching. Ending with tension unresolved. The sky began to pale as dawn crept in. Elia, still awake, sat by the window, staring out at the empty horizon. The mutia pulsed faintly against her skin. The battle hadn't started. But the war had already begun inside her. And the enemy, both outside and within, wasn't done yet. The days blurred, each one darker than the last, though the sun still hung in the sky. The village stood hollow, like an empty shell, as if life itself had been sucked from its streets. Chickens no longer clucked at dawn. The children no longer played under the old mango tree. Elia felt it in her bones, the world was holding its breath. The aswangs were preparing for something. The mutia pulsed more violently now, the once soothing heartbeat replaced by a sharp, irregular rhythm, like it was warning her of something that had already begun. Rising stakes Mang Lito spent his nights burning herbs and drawing protective sigils along the village's paths, but even he looked thinner, wearier, as if the battle had already worn him down. "They're growing stronger," he muttered while crushing leaves into a foul-smelling paste. "Their hunger sharpens. Their numbers swell. The full moon draws near, Anak. When it rises, so will they." Elia could feel the pressure building like a storm that hadn't yet broken, pressing against her chest. The thought of standing against the aswangs, the creatures who had already torn apart everything she loved, left her more hollow than brave. Tomas's face haunted her dreams. Sometimes it was his old, familiar smile that reached her. Other times it was his twisted, monstrous reflection, skin stretched too tight, eyes hollow, voice nothing but static. Which one was the real Tomas? And if he were still out there, would she have to fight him too? Emotional burdens Mang Lito had trained her to use the mutia in small ways, feeling the pull of hidden energies, calling whispers from the sea, but the more power she touched, the more it frightened her. The more it changed her. Some nights, she thought she could hear the aswangs calling to her through the trees, not with malice, but with something stranger, welcome. And a darker question began circling her mind like a vulture. What if this was who she was meant to be all along? When her mother left, was it to escape the curse, or to embrace it? The seed of doubt grew roots, tangling around her confidence, tightening every time she looked in the mirror and saw how hollow her own eyes had become. Support in doubts one evening, as the horizon burned orange and purple, she sat at the shoreline, the mutia resting on her palm, watching as the waves lapped at her bare feet. The shadowy emerged, half shadow and half water, its voice low and steady in her chest. "You are afraid," it said. Elia nodded. "Good," it continued. "Fear keeps you alive, but fear also binds you. Let go of one, and the other will follow." But that was the part she couldn't understand, was the fear holding her back, or keeping her human? She stared at the creature's glassy black eyes, wondering if her mother had once stood in the same spot, wrestling with the same choice. "Will it ever stop hurting?" she asked softly. "No," the shadowy answered. "But you will learn to carry it." Increasing tension the next morning, the village awoke to a chilling discovery. Every mirror in every house was shattered. Every window pane cracked. As if the world itself had turned its gaze away. And on the old kapok tree at the village center, claw marks cut deep into the bark, a message. A warning. The moon is coming. Elia's chest tightened. She had known, in her bones, that the final attack was near. But now, the evidence was carved into the earth itself. Mang Lito packed supplies into a battered leather satchel, bundles of salt, woven pouches of sacred herbs, and a long, curved dagger that smelled of iron and old blood. But even he hesitated before handing the blade to her. "You don't need to be ready," he said quietly. "You just need to be willing." She wasn't sure she was either. A friendship under strain that night, she dreamed again. Tomas stood at the old footbridge, barefoot, his clothes damp with sea spray. His face looked normal, almost. But his voice echoed wrong, distorted like it was underwater. "They lied to you," he whispered. "Your mother. Mang Lito, they don't want you to see the truth." She wanted to step closer, but the mutia burned hotter against her chest the nearer she got to him. Tomas tilted his head. "You feel it too, don't you? You're not like them. You're like me." When she woke, her heart hammered in her throat. The warmth of the mutia lingered long after the dream. And the words, whispered so softly, refused to fade. Signs of the enemy's power by the following dusk, more signs had appeared. Goats and chickens lay untouched, their bodies drained dry but unmarked. Strange patterns appeared on the muddy paths, twisted footprints with too many toes, circling the village like a noose tightening. The air smelled sweeter, thicker, as if the rot of the aswangs world was seeping into her own. The villagers had begun to notice her silence, the way her eyes lingered too long on the tree line, the way the mutia glowed faintly under her shirt even when the night was clouded. A few looked at her with pity. Most looked at her with fear. The unspoken choice: she stood at the village's edge, facing the darkening forest. The moon hung low, bloated and pale, ready to rise into its full light. She gripped the curved dagger Manglito had given her, her palm slick with sweat. The mutia's pulsing was no longer gentle, it throbbed now, in rhythm with her own panicked heartbeat. Somewhere beyond the treeline, the aswangs waited. And somewhere in the shadows, her mother's voice whispered through the rustling leaves. "You were never meant to fight us. You were meant to return." The line between right and wrong blurred beneath the weight of that single truth. She hadn't chosen this life. But she would have to choose how it ended. The night the full moon finally rose, the world felt wrong. The air, too still. The shadows, too sharp. Even the sea had gone quiet, as though the earth itself braced for the moment everything would break. Elia stood alone on the cliff's edge, staring out over the endless dark waves. The mutia at her chest pulsed like a living heart, its rhythm faster, more urgent now. She knew the attack would come tonight. Manglito's warning still echoed in her mind. But Manglito was gone. Vanished. Without a word. Without a trace. Just before sunset, she'd found his hut abandoned, the protective sigils scrubbed clean from the walls, the iron blade left sitting, untouched, on the floor. For the first time in days, fear wasn't the only thing twisting her stomach. It was betrayal. An unexpected betrayal. The pieces had been there all along, the way Manglito's face tightened each time she asked about her mother, the way he hesitated before explaining the mutia's power, the strange herbs he burned at night, their scent more binding than protective. She'd mistaken his silence for wisdom, his sternness for strength. But now, as the moonlight bled across the village, something clicked. Manglito hadn't left to hide. He'd left to prepare. Elia's heart sank as the full weight of the thought settled over her. Manglito wasn't her shield against the aswangs. He was part of them. Maybe he always had been. A new enemy emerges. A sharp snap echoed behind her. She turned, muscles stiff with dread, and there he stood, no longer the frail old healer, but something taller, straighter. His skin, always weathered, now looked smooth and pale under the moonlight, his eyes too dark and too deep. The voice that came from him still carried the softness of the man who once offered her food and shelter, but now there was something else beneath it, a deep, guttural undertone, like two voices speaking at once. "I did what I could for you, Elia," Manglito said, stepping closer. "You weren't ready before. You still might not be. But it's time you understood." Her throat went dry. Understood what? That the curse was never meant to be broken. His smile was thin, almost tender. It was meant to awaken you. A deeper realization. For a moment, the world spun. Everything she believed about her past, her family, her own blood, flipped inside out. The curse wasn't a punishment. It was a legacy. One her mother had embraced. One Manglito had guarded. And one the aswangs had been waiting for her to inherit. "You felt it, haven't you?" he asked. "The pull. The hunger." Elia's fingers brushed the mutia hanging from her neck, feeling its warmth burn hotter with every heartbeat. She had thought it was protecting her. But now she wasn't sure if it was keeping her safe, or keeping her tethered. Manglito's voice softened, more human than ever. "Your mother didn't leave you. She left the village. She left them. She wanted you to make your own choice." The sky seemed to darken, the stars flickering like dying embers. And somewhere deep in the forest, the aswangs stirred. A twist of fate. Before Elia could respond, Another shape emerged from the darkness, smaller, faster. It darted from shadow to shadow, until it stopped at the edge of the cliff, just a few steps away. Thomas. His face pale, his eyes wide. But his voice was his own. Elia, don't listen to him, Thomas gasped, breathless. He's twisting it. The mutia isn't meant to protect you from the aswangs. It's meant to protect the world from you. She stared at him, frozen, as the two people she once trusted stood on either side of her, their truths cutting her in opposite directions. Why would he lie? She whispered. Tomas's expression darkened. Because you're the one they've been waiting for. A chilling complication. The ground trembled. Faint at first, like a distant drum, then stronger, as if something enormous was stirring beneath the earth. The sky shifted, the clouds parting to reveal the moon in its fullest, brightest shape. In that moment, the mutia flared so hot she almost dropped it, and a vision seared into her mind, an island, floating high above the sea, hidden beyond the horizon, the true birthplace of her bloodline. A place untouched by human hands. A place the aswangs called home. She saw her mother there, standing at the edge of the floating island's cliffs, eyes as dark as the creatures that stalked the village. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't hiding. She was waiting. Suspense and unanswered questions. When the vision faded, Elia stumbled back, breath ragged, heart racing. What did you see? Manglito asked, voice almost gentle. Elia swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust. The floating island. It's real. His eyes glinted in the moonlight. It always was. And suddenly, she understood the real reason the aswangs had returned. The real reason the mutia had chosen her. It wasn't just about the village. It was about the island. About returning to where it all began. But why? To end the curse? Or to claim her place among them? The wind howled, the first warning cry of the coming storm. Tomas took her hand. His fingers trembled. You don't have to choose their path, he said softly. You can still fight this. You're stronger than them. But her hand, resting against the mutia, felt the warmth growing steadier, calmer. Like it was welcoming her home. The ground shuddered again, stronger this time. The aswangs were coming. But so was the truth. And the only thing left for Elia now was to choose what side she'd stand on. The forest stood deathly still as Elia walked toward its heart. No wind stirred the leaves. No bird dared sing. Only the heavy, rhythmic thump of the mutia against her chest reminded her she was still alive. Behind her, Tomas trailed silently, his face pale, his loyalty sharp but fragile, like he knew this was a path only she could walk, even if he wished otherwise. Ahead, the trees stretched tall and black, their twisted branches curving like outstretched hands, beckoning her forward. And at the forest's center, the aswangs waited. She could feel them now, not just as shadows or shapes in the dark, but as voices, soft, melodic, and oddly comforting. They weren't hiding anymore. They were calling her home. The confrontation begins. The clearing opened before her like a wound in the earth, moonlight spilling across the blood-stained grass. They stood there, tall, pale, their eyes gleaming like glass in the dark. Their human faces peeled away, shifting, rippling like water, revealing what they truly were. Not monsters. Family. One figure stepped forward, Manglito. His voice carried the same calm as always, but now stripped of the old man's disguise. You were born for this, Elia, he said softly, as though offering her a gift. You are the bridge between two worlds. You are ours. Elia's fingers clenched around the mutia, feeling the way it pulsed against her skin, not in warning, but in anticipation. And behind Manglito, more faces appeared. Her mother. Alive. Changed. Her eyes held no warmth, only a strange, serene pride. Choices and sacrifices. The world tilted, and Elia's heart clenched. Every piece of her old life, every question, every aching loss suddenly fit into place like jagged puzzle pieces. Her mother hadn't abandoned her out of fear. She had left to prepare the path for her return. The aswangs weren't here to kill her. They were here to crown her. The choice stood before her, clear and sharp as a blade: embrace the blood that had always belonged to her, or raise the iron dagger and turn against the only family she had left. Tomas' voice broke the silence behind her, low and shaking. Elia, please. You don't have to become like them. But her mother's voice floated through the stillness, soft and certain. You were never meant to be anything else. The battle within the pull of the mutia intensified, its magic vibrating deep inside her bones. Images flooded her mind, her mother's smile before she disappeared, Manglito's stories and lessons, the nights of hunger and loneliness, all leading here. And suddenly, the real enemy wasn't the aswangs at all. It was her own fear. The fear that she had always been destined to be something monstrous. Tears burned her eyes as she raised the iron dagger, her hand trembling. Tomas' footsteps crunched forward, slow and careful, his voice cracking. You can choose, Elia. Right now. You can break the curse. But her mother's voice was like a lullaby. There is no curse, Anik. Only who you were meant to become. The critical choice. The air grew heavy, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. Elia's gaze darted from Tomas to her mother, from the human world to the one waiting just beyond it. Two paths. Two futures. One choice. She raised the mutia high, the pulse now steady and strong, a heartbeat that no longer belonged to the charm, but to herself. I've always been afraid, she whispered. Afraid of what I was, afraid of being alone, afraid of the truth. Her voice grew stronger, her hand steady. But fear isn't who I am. I choose. And in that moment, she made her decision. The twist, but before she could act, the earth beneath her feet split open. A great, impossible shape began to rise from the shadows. Towering. Ancient. Not a swang. Something older. The floating island itself wasn't just a place. It was alive. And it had been watching her all along. The trees shook as the land's true form surfaced, a creature of earth and spirit, its eyes burning with centuries of memory. The aswangs recoiled, even Manglito stepping back as the creature's voice echoed across the clearing, neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel. The child is neither prey nor heir. The child is choice itself. Elia's knees buckled under the weight of the voice, but her heart stood firm. The mutia, once thought to be her family's curse or her salvation, was neither. It had only ever been a key. And now the door was open. The emotional high Elia lifted her eyes to meet her mother's one last time. I love you, she said, her voice shaking. But I won't be a part of this. The aswangs stepped forward, their mouths stretching wide in protest, but the creature's voice silenced them with a single word. Enough. The earth glowed beneath Elia's feet, and the mutia dissolved into light, wrapping around her like armor. The pull that had haunted her since childhood, the hunger, the belonging, the pain, all fell away. For the first time, she felt whole. Not human. Not monster. Herself. Resolution, for now as the dawn threatened to crack the sky open, the aswangs faded back into the dark. The floating island's shadow receded, its voice leaving only a final warning behind. The choice will always return. Elia stood alone in the clearing, the mutia gone, the weight of her family's legacy replaced by something stronger. Her own. Tomas moved to her side, his face pale but proud. You did it, he whispered. She turned her eyes to the horizon, to the sea where the floating island waited, unseen but real. For now, she replied. Because the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The village was quiet now. Not the uneasy stillness of fear, but the kind that comes after a storm, when the earth is too exhausted to do anything but breathe. Elia stood by the old shoreline, barefoot in the wet sand, the first rays of morning painting the sky in soft streaks of gold. The sea, once wild and endless, looked so small now. As if, somehow, her world had grown far larger overnight. The Mutya was gone. The weight that had once hung at her chest now lived somewhere deeper, invisible but permanent. The choice she made in the clearing could not be undone. There was no turning back. Consequences: the aswangs had retreated, their hunger left unsatisfied, their hold over the village broken, at least for now. The old stories would change. People would whisper her name the way they once whispered about monsters in the dark. The child of the cursed bloodline. The girl who defied her fate. But not everyone had survived the night. Some homes stood empty, the families gone or grieving. Shadows of what had happened clung to the walls and the streets, even in daylight. The village would heal, but it would never forget. And Elia would carry both the burden of her choice and the quiet, stubborn hope that it had been the right one. A farewell Tomas stood at her side, his arm still bandaged from the skirmish with the aswangs, his expression distant but soft. "You could leave, you know," he said, nudging a stone with his foot. "Go find the island. See what's really out there." Elia shook her head, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I don't think the island wants to be found." Not yet. There was no need to say the rest. The floating island was more than a place. It was a reminder. A silent promise that her story wasn't finished. But this chapter, at least, had ended. Coming to terms that night, she returned to the old hut. Mang Lito's herbs were still scattered across the floor, the iron blade left untouched where she'd last seen it. His absence echoed through the space, sharp and hollow. She stood there for a long time, staring at the chair where he used to sit, remembering the way his voice had sounded, warm and patient, long before she ever saw what lay behind it. Despite everything, a piece of her still missed him. Her mother's voice still lingered in her head, too. Not in words, but in the way the wind moved through the trees, and in the taste of the salt on her lips. A part of her had known, deep down, long before the truth surfaced, that family isn't always what you want it to be. Sometimes it's a wound you learn to live with. And sometimes, it's a choice you make for yourself. A new understanding. In the days that followed, the village began its slow return to life. The old fishermen returned to the water, though their eyes often drifted to the horizon. Children played again, though their games no longer spoke of aswangs in the woods. They spoke of her. Some called her brave. Others, foolish. A few called her something else entirely, marked. Elia didn't mind. She had learned to live with the whispers. It wasn't their voices she listened for anymore. It was her own. The journey had taught her what no one else could, that fear is a powerful thing, but it only rules you if you let it. And fate is only as strong as the person who dares to challenge it. A final conversation one evening, as the sky slipped from dusk into night, Tomas found her on the same cliff where it had all begun. "They still don't understand what you did," he said softly. "Neither do I," she answered, the corner of her mouth tugging upward in something between a smile and a sigh. He lowered himself to sit beside her, the ocean wind lifting his hair. "You chose to be human," he said, almost like it was a question. She thought about it for a moment. "No. I chose to be myself." The silence stretched long and gentle between them, broken only by the waves below. The final moment when the stars bloomed across the sky, she caught sight of it again, just for a breath, a faint outline in the distance, floating above the sea. The island. Watching. Waiting. A quiet promise that her story wasn't done. Not yet. She rose to her feet, letting the wind whip through her hair, and looked out at the vastness beyond the horizon. The same sea that had once made her feel small now stretched like an invitation. Someday, she knew, the island would call her again. And next time, she would be ready. Last line, but for now, the night belonged to her, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the dark.